I'm Schuyler. I'm a lecturer in the Communication and Cognition Department at Tilburg University in the Netherlands, where the other half of this event is being held. And I have a very self-destructive habit that I think a lot of you might share, so I want to share with you. And that's that I read a lot of news. Right when I wake up, just before I go to bed, in breaks throughout the day. The Guardian is my favorite because it has a whole section on the climate crisis. So that's hours of daily on-demand doom. Let me read a couple of headlines from the last couple of days. You feel like you're suffocating. Florida outdoor workers are collapsing in the heat without water or shade. That's from today. Greece takes stock of wildfires that raged through Athens suburbs. It's from yesterday. And Pantanal Waterway project could destroy a paradise on Earth. That's from 2 days ago. Where do we find hope in these types of headlines? In my academic community, folks think a lot about persuasion strategies. In the context of the climate crisis, this is often framed as finding ways to effectively communicate urgency and severity. This is under the assumption that once everyone recognizes the urgency and the severity, we will come together and solve the climate crisis together, live happily ever after. But we also know that fear doesn't always work like that. It doesn't always lead to a spirited fight. Sometimes it leads to paralysis or despair, and paralysis and despair are not going to help us solve anything. If we want to progress and find solutions, we're going to need hope, but where do we find that? I think that hope glimmers here and there in a feel-good story in the news, in a town hall meeting, in a good conversation between friends. But to meet this crisis, we need hope to shine. We need glaring hope. And I think we're only going to be able to find that kind of hope together by taking the little glimmer of hope that each of us holds and by sharing it, by teaching each other and training each other, by talking and plotting and playing together. And so that's what I want this Communicating Climate Hope to be, this Communicating Climate Hope event to be about. That's why I agreed to spend the last year organizing it. Because I want to talk and plot and play my way into a more hopeful approach to my research and my community. And I would like to do that with all of you. So I look forward to sharing this space and my hope with you over the next couple of days. May we come out shining. Thank you.
And Schuyler and I were both there to present on each of our own research, which we both study the role of metaphor in climate change communications. And it wasn't just the two of us who happened to be presenting on this. There's actually a whole session, a whole afternoon dedicated to that topic, and also a whole bunch of posters as well. And I was really impressed with the work being presented, especially given that most of the researchers doing this work were students. And, you know, Schuyler and I are both ECR ourselves, early career researchers, and so the fact that we were kind of the oldest people in the room studying this was quite striking to me. But as I sat listening to talk after talk about the ways we can use metaphor to convince people that climate change is real and a problem, or the ways in which metaphors can be used to completely derail your message, I kept thinking about how we were just talking to each other, right, to other researchers. And this was especially true for the younger presenters. I wondered whether their work would be more useful if they were sharing it with other young people, those at the forefront of the climate action movement, but perhaps spending their summers doing advocacy and outreach and marching rather than presenting at conferences to a bunch of professors would probably be to the detriment of their young careers. And at the end of this conference, it was announced that Schuyler and I had been awarded a small grant from the association, from their Building Bridges Fund. It was seed money to fund a conference on climate change communications, one that would allow us to collaborate between Vancouver here and Tilburg there without yet another transcontinental, transatlantic flight on my part, a conference that would bring together many of the people whose talks I had watched that summer afternoon with the people who are doing the actual communications work. Since then, our initial proposal for a 2-day hybrid event turned from an idea born of our frustration with the status quo, our own climate anxieties, and my extreme dislike of long flights, to the 3 days we are beginning now. Thanks to contributions from the artists and poets and authors and musicians and other creative visionaries who have joined us along the way, this initial plan of a hybrid 2-day conference for both academics and activists has now joined and turned into art and creativity with joy at its heart. I would especially like to extend a welcome to those of you who are joining us not from the academic world. So those of you who are coming from nonprofit and government sectors. As academics, it's very easy for us to live in a sort of ideal land of theory and hypotheticals, but you are very much grounded in the realities of red tape and budgets and putting theory into practice. So thank you for all the work that you're doing, and I hope at this conference we can learn from you and how best we as researchers can support you in your work. Throughout the next 3 days, I fully expect we'll all experience a range of emotions, like the frustration of the tech that worked yesterday not working today, and hope and joy, but also anxiety and even despair. Please take time to sit with those feelings and process them. Allow yourself the grace of taking breaks when you need it, whether you're going outside for a walk in the rare Vancouver sun, or taking a nap or eating a cookie. And please uplift and value those around you. We are all in this room, whether physically or virtually, because we are all in this together. So please take care of each other. Enjoy this 3-day celebration of climate hope. And thank you very much for making this commitment to yourself and to each other and to our planet.
Thank you, Elise. So since the beginning of this year, we've been working with Jason Davis. I don't know if he's here. Hello, Jason. From the Climate Stories Project to train a really cool and passionate group of UBC students in the art of climate storytelling. Our group of climate story fellows learned the power of a good story, how to tell their own story, and then how to elicit the stories of others. So right now we want to share a couple of the stories that they documented from speakers that you'll likely see around either in person or virtually in the next couple of days. So the first will be an interview with Jenny Pickrell, who is a plenary speaker here at Tilburg tomorrow. Jenny is professor of environmental geography at Sheffield University in England. Her research focuses on inspiring grassroots solutions to environmental problems and hopeful and positive ways in which we can change social practices. She's published 3 books, Cyber Protest, Anti-War Activism, and Eco-Homes, and has over 30 articles on themes around environmentalism, indigenous geographies, anarchism, and eco-housing. And she's being interviewed by San, who is a linguistics major with an interest in language revitalization. Indigenous peoples, they acknowledge, have a far deeper understanding of the planet and our relationships with it than Western culture often does. And that knowledge is encoded in their language. And so San believes that through successful Indigenous language practice revitalization and deference to and uplifting these Indigenous voices, we can achieve a new balance with the planet and justice for those harmed by climate change. San has led walkouts and strikes throughout high school, and they're very enthusiastic to make a difference on a wider scale. So here's a little clip of the conversation between Jenny and San. Hopefully you'll be able to hear.
So my name's Jenny Pickrell. I'm a professor of environmental geography at the University of Sheffield in England. And I've been working on hope and exploring hopeful alternatives to capitalism and the environmental crisis for a number of years. And I've also just started working with a new colleague who is really interested in the power of hopelessness. So we're starting to write together around the interplay between hope and hopelessness. I started doing research in the 1990s. That's when I did my PhD. And at the time, it was a very exciting period of environmental activism, both in Britain and actually, mirrored in a lot in the USA as well. And then eventually in the 2000s in Europe. So there were these really exciting environmental and anti-capitalist protests. And it felt like a lot was changing. There were some real wins against sort of mass road building across Britain, for example. But there was also a lot of burnout and disappointment that people would be dedicating years of their lives to a campaign or living in a protest camp and then ultimately lose that campaign. Living on the front line of protest, I think, is particularly exhausting and can ultimately sometimes be a bit demoralizing. So I began to be really interested in how alternatives are created and maintained and sustained, and what are the elements of that, and how can we generate more of them. And as it happened, my cohort of kind of activist friends we kind of aged together, and they went and started building self-building eco-communities, often quite illegal because it wasn't, people didn't have money. So they bought land and started building things in the forest. And it really struck me that they were searching for forms of hope. So eco-communities it's a relatively new term to cover a lot of examples that have existed for a long time. So for me, an eco-community is an environmentally focused collective way of living that also focuses on generating livelihoods, often from land or locally, educational spaces, and building basically communities that are low in environmental impact, but also have social connection. There's a really great example in Sheffield, where I work at the university. And it's where I think it's two houses that are together in a terrace house. And what they did was they knocked through one wall to create a bigger house. And then they've reshaped some of the uses of the rooms and created a very simple community of a number of different people who share. So they've got two kitchens, but they share between them. They share the garden, and therefore more things get growing because it's not just one person's responsibility. And to start living more ecologically, you can just share more. And sometimes that requires changing your infrastructures, knocking some walls down or some fences. But actually, often it's just about sharing. You can just open things up to your neighbours and have those different conversations. Thinking, what could I share? And how can I make my life simpler by sharing that? Or even, how can I make my life more fun by perhaps eating with my neighbours once a week? How can I not have to own all the power tools I need by having a shared space? Sharing some of this excess food that I've grown, and also get some other things back in return. So to me, the sharing and the working together is the fundamental principle, which actually seems really small and mundane, but contradicts capitalism, because capitalism is about us each getting as much as possible, us each hoarding profit and money and goods. And the alternative is not a complete rejection of capitalism. The alternative is to push against aspects of it in ways in which you benefit in life. So to me, it's about working out what you feel comfortable with and what's fun and starting there. And it doesn't mean that you have to progress to giving up everything you own or sharing all your income. It's very much about finding ways that are more livable for you and reduce the environmental impact.
All right, so the piece I'm going to read for you to crack this open is called Tortoise Carries the Moon. It was written as a bespoke commission for the Toronto Brompton Cycling Club, who was doing a group ride in May for the Flower Moon and wanted to sort of crack that open with a poem, which is possibly the nicest idea I've ever heard. There will be an awkward interruption in the middle of this as I try to page down with one hand on my laptop. It's okay, don't worry. We're just gonna let it be awkward. So this is called Tortoise Carries the Moon. Tortoise knows the future is shaped like an egg. Down in the sand it is growing, luminous enough to catch hawk's eyes, down in the craters disguised as beach. Tortoise knows about night planting, We set our shells while the ghost crabs sleep and trust them to ripen, lunging distance from the sea. For life needs water, and water finds its way, and the sky is round and the droplet round, and when they speak at night, in the tongue of the intertidal. Tortoise knows it is an animal, and animals move toward light. Unceasing it follows the waning moon, and the waves reach up and shift the roads, and the lilies live atop the waves, mouths open, intertidal, and the road is strange and the sky brimful of pinpricks watching back for us, and across its shell the lilies brush, moonlit, borne up, borne forward. There's the awkward bit. Tortoise knows what it means to clutch a world that won't stop moving, where the moon is round and the wheel round, and it holds us in shelled hatching, luminous enough to light one step and one step only, passing the moonlight along our backs, following inexorable rivers. Eggs in the clutch, spokes in the wheel, slipstreaming, glowing, leading, following, no idea what is coming. Tortoise knows what it means to clutch when you have nothing but your mouth, and rush fast as our newborn legs will tumble, in and out of each other's anti-shadows, joyous, intertidal, clutching the moon upon our backs, stumbling, rolling, down to the sea. Thank you so much.
And in addition to that poem, you can also read some of Leah's other poetry at our in-person gallery and also our online digital gallery. So at the conference, we'll have a display of books, poetry, artwork, all contributed by you all. And same thing, we've posted some of those as well as some other contributions on our website. So because part of our goal of this conference, as well as today, is to really bring art and creativity into the room, we wanted to make sure we had space to highlight and share the works being done by all of you, all of the creative efforts that are reaching those who, well, how do I put this? Art touches everyone in different ways, in ways that words and statistics don't. And so it's really meaningful to us to see all of the work that everyone's doing and willing to share. So thank you, Leah. And with that, we are exactly at the end of this opening ceremony.